Hello and welcome to episode 30 of this now quite long series as I build my way through the terrain tutorials, the terrain workshops in the Battle Games in Middle-earth magazines. I've had a lot of fun with this. I've really made a lot of great terrain that's been very easy and really good for beginners and experienced crafters alike. And this is going to be no different. We've left behind the dam of Saruman's Dam from last month, and this month we're jumping back over to Osgiliath and we're making more ruins. So it's going to be a build which is going to mirror some of the previous ones that I've done in this series, but hopefully we'll be bringing some new techniques and some new ideas along with it. Now, I do often try to do an alternative build that isn't just following the tutorial from the magazines. Right now, as I stand here, I've no idea whether I'm going to manage that or not this month, but I'm going to definitely try. So fingers crossed, what we'll end up with at the end of this video is both the build from the magazine and also something else. So, as always, let's have a look at the magazine, see what it says, and then get stuck in. So here we are, the ruins of Osgiliath. The once proud marble halls of Osgiliath have been reduced to ruin and rubble through the constant aggression of the forces of Mordor. Here we will show you how to make model ruins to represent this embattled city. So what it says you need is 5mm thick foam card. I use 5mm thick XPS for that, the black stuff that you need to kind of like sand down. A ruler, 2 colour pens, craft knife, PVA glue, hardboard, handsaw, suitably textured wallpaper. That's interesting. That's something that I've seen Luke from Luke's APS do, or Geek Gaming, or whatever you want to say. He had some textured wallpaper. I've never managed to find any, so I won't be able to do that. Balsa wood, gravel, sand, black textured paint, and then a bunch of other paints and inks. So it's a pretty standard build. You can probably do it with pretty much any material you want. You can use cheap expanded polystyrene, packing foam, and maybe that's what I'll do as my advanced one. I'll do multiple different materials. That's a good idea. There we are. I just had that while I was talking. So anyway, I'm going to gather together the materials that they say here, or as close to as I can get. And what we'll do is we will start building through following both their materials and then a bunch of other ones that I'll gather together, and we'll end up with some really cool looking ruins of Osgiliath. So step one, and as I've said, I'm going to make at least one of everything it suggests using multiple different types of material. So yeah, it's going to be a fun little video. I'm actually quite excited. But step one is preparing the walls, and what we're going to do is a simple corner, and then we'll also do a corner with a doorway and a window. So this is going to end up with a couple of different builds. So from this first section, so preparing the walls. To create a wall that is of appropriate thickness, 2 sheets of 5mm thick foam card can be used. So this is 5mm thick XPS. The only reason is I don't have foam card, but that's basically what is inside foam card. So what you do is first cut 2 identical rectangles. On one of these, using a ruler for accuracy, draw a brickwork pattern on one side. Then with a different coloured pen, mark out the line where the edge of the collapsed wall will be. Next, carefully cut along that line with a sharp craft knife to separate the wall into 2 halves. Finally, one of the halves can be used as a template to draw around on the other piece of card. You'll be left with 4 wall shapes, 2 matching pairs. So that's what I'm going to do. I am going to use my Proxon to cut out the triangles because it's just going to be easier. But what I'll then do is do that drawing, and I'll bring you along when I'm just about to start doing the cutting and separating them out. So if you don't have a Proxon, what you need, and I will so highly recommend that you get one of these. This one's quite long, but they do one that is 40 centimetres, which is absolutely perfect, and I keep meaning to order it. But get yourself a safety ruler. This is just brilliant. It's got like cloth on the bottom, it's anti-slip, and you will not cut yourself because it's got a really good high strong guard, and it's really good. So if you are going to be doing cutting, probably top of my list of things to do is safety rulers, because we use knives so much. Anyway, that's my little bit of preaching. So yeah, if you don't have a Proxon, get a safety ruler, cut yourself very carefully with a sharp knife, and you'll be away. So let's get that done, and while I'm doing that, I'll think about what alternative material to use, and yeah, get stuck into that one as well. What we've got here is a 20 centimetre, 200mm wide, and it's actually 7.5 high, 75mm high, because I've gone for 15mm tall bricks, and then I've gone for 30mm or 3 centimetre wide bricks. I'm about to do the step in the book where we're going to cut the middle and separate it out. But first of all, because I'm using this material, I need to come in with my wire brush and brush both sides of this and also both sides of the duplicate, which is what it's had me do, so that any paint or glue will actually adhere, because this is very shiny and it won't adhere. So I'm going to get that done, and then what I'll do is I'll come along and I will mark out where I'm going to cut the join, and then I'll copy that over to that. So I'll bring you along for when I get to that as well. But I just thought I'd say, be very aware when you're using shiny materials that you might need to score it up if you're going to glue it. Scored up, and I've gone along, and I don't have different coloured pens like it says, but I've marked out where I want to cut. So what I'm going to do is come along very, very carefully with a very sharp knife and just start cutting along the line that I selected, which is where the edge of the wall is going to be, where it's going to have been damaged. Just like this. So hopefully this is not going to look too odd. There we have it. Now, the one thing that you will notice is that I have here and here I have blocks that are hanging over where well, here I have a block where it's hanging over where it probably shouldn't. So I'm going to cut that out from here, and I'm going to save that because I might use that in another part of the build. So now we have our two sides. So the next thing to do is going to be to basically draw around that and cut that out as well, and then we will have the wall. So I'm going to get that done, draw along those lines, and then we'll glue them together, and then we'll have done the first wall. Wasn't that quick? So these have been stuck together and glued, and I think they're looking pretty good. And what we're going to do now is we're going to make our little L shape, and that will be our first ruin done. Well, nearly, because I need to put it on the base, but I'll do them all on the bases later. So what we'll do is we'll run a bead of PVA down there, and what I like to do is I have these dressmaker's pins, which I use just to add some structural integrity and some rigidity to these kind of 90-degree joins, because they're going to get use, they're going to get knocked, and this will prevent them from actually kind of falling apart too easily. So a little bit of PVA, press the corner together. If you want it to be a perfect 90 degrees, then maybe get yourself some Lego or what have you, and that will allow you to hold it to a perfect 90. And then what I'll do is I'll push in a couple of dressmaker's pins like that. And there we are. That's our first little bit of ruin. It's very easy, isn't it? It's a nice easy technique. That'll look fine. So we'll come and paint that later. But for now, get that to dry. And what I'm going to do now is do the next one, which is going to be very similar, but with doors and windows. So we'll show you how you're going to do that. And then I'll do one with an alternative material, I think. Right, let's have a look at the first alternate material. And what you can see here is a corner of normal bubbly packing foam, which I have saved and was up in my huge pile of saved rubbish that I figure I might one day use. And what we're going to do is we're going to do this with very little specialist tools, very few. So you can do this with a kitchen knife. I have my Stanley knife. And it is possible, and I won't film all this because it's a nasty sound. It is possible to cut this without causing excessive bubbling. You need a sharp knife and a bit of patience. So what I'll do is I'll cut this. I won't do all of it on camera, and I'll bring it back and show what it looks like when it's finished. And then what we'll do is we'll be able to make use of this upright, this corner section here, and I'll cut some shapes into it, and then that will be our first ruin thing, which is really quick, as you can see, even quicker than the official method. So all you need is a very sharp knife, and to slice through it like that. Now, even if you do cause bubbling, it's okay, because we will be sealing this again with very easy, simple to find materials. You don't have to cut in a single straight. Oh, it looks like I'm going to do all of this on camera. You don't have to cut in a single like stroke. You can also do a bit of a sawing motion, which does work quite well with this. But you do need a sharp knife. That's what's important, is that your knife is sharp. Because what you need to be doing is cutting. You do not want to be kind of pulling. You need to actually slice. So that is pretty much free. So let's just do the last little bit, which is always the hardest part. And will probably cause some bubbling. There we are. Right, so that's done. As you can see, there's a very small amount of bubbling. I've got a little bit on my knife here, but very, very little. A lot of people will tell you that you just cannot use this sort of material for hobbying, but you really can if you have the right tools. And the right tools is just a very sharp knife, so that's not hard to find. These are a couple of quid down your local hardware store, a couple of dollars to get yourself a really nice knife, and get yourself a sharpening blade as well, and then you just never need to buy new blades for it. So they're very, very economical. So now that we've got this, what we're going to do is we're going to cut out the shape of the ruin. And to do that, I will get tape. I will get a measure, mark out lines, and then I will cut those lines. So I'll get it marked out, and then come back when I'm about to do the cutting, and then that'll be our next done, which is really cool. You can see that I've drawn some lines on this, just using a Sharpie and a straight edge. And so what I'm going to do now is get the same knife and cut that shape out. So once again, you're looking to be very vertical and very sharp blade, and you should be able to cut through it without causing bubbling. There we are. So I'll do the other side, and that's finished. And you really can see, I mean, this has taken about 5 minutes of video time, of real time to do. Obviously less than that because of the speeding up, but about 5 minutes of real time. And we've already got basically a shape for a ruined building, and it looks fine. And it's taken no special skills, no special materials, even materials that a lot of people say you can't use. And we've also been left with some quite useful offcuts, which will not be thrown away because I don't throw things away. So we'll try to make use of those in a later part of this video. So I'll get that done and then move on to the next step. So yeah, I hope that was helpful and interesting. I'm certainly enjoying this build and enjoying trying to stretch myself with new materials, which is just good fun. The next bit of the official build is making a doorway. So what I've got here is another 7.5 centimetre high, 2 sets. They're 15 centimetres because I split it in half, because 25 centimetres that way, sorry, and 7.5 that way if you're interested. What I've got here is a template which I've made for a previous build, and I saved my templates so I can make reuse of this, and you can see that's going to look really, really nice in the scale. So to read what it says, this is really important actually. It's best to make doorways while your matching wall sections are still separate. First, take one of the sides and draw a suitably sized rectangular door onto it, using a model to gauge the height. Cut out the door with a craft knife. Next, hold the two halves of the wall together and use the doorway as a template to copy it onto the other wall section. Around this, draw a slightly larger doorway, this time with an arched top, which is what this will be. I will make another template for the inner door, and then I'll save both of those and I can use those again for over many projects. This larger doorway can then be cut out with a craft knife. Finally, glue the pair of wall sections together, creating a door that has an arched recess, sometimes called an architrave. So that's going to be really cool. So we're going to do that now. There is also a top tip in this section, which is really, really important. Corners, doors and windows are some of the strongest sections of a building structure. As such, these are usually the parts of a building that are left standing after the rest have been destroyed, which is true. You can look at pictures, as it says, look at real photographs of real ruined buildings can provide inspiration for the different shapes these can take, and that's an important thing to say. We are making wargaming terrain. It's not going to be 100% realistic. However, if you look at the real world, you're more likely to get things closer to realistic than you are if you just try to use your imagination. So you're looking at pictures and photographs and what have you is really, really important. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make myself another template, which is going to be slightly smaller than this. I might even, and here's a top tip, I might even use this bit of card. So I might even cut out a key into it, and then that will be both the archway and the smaller inner door, and that might make more sense. So I'll do that and then mark it up, cut it out, and then show what it looks like. And I think this is going to look really nice. Next thing I'm going to do is going to combine a couple of steps as it happens. Step 4 is decorative arch windows, which I'm going to do on this. And then I'm also going to do some of the additional detail suggestions, so basically an upper floor. So I'll go for both of those things. So first of all, the decorative arch windows, and I'm also going to do another doorway like I did just now on this section also. So I've got my template here, as you can see, which has worked well for the other one, so I can do one for this as well. So these windows can be made using a similar technique to the doorway. First, draw an arched window onto one of your separate wall sections and then cut it out with a craft knife. Using the arch as a template, draw the same shape onto the other identical wall. Now I won't do that. What I'll do is I will make a template out of card, as I always do, and then transfer that over. But it's basically the same thing. And if I bring the book over, magazine over, and get it actually so you can see it, this is the shape that they're talking about. So it's going to have an arch in the front, and it's going to have two smaller arches going inside. So that's going to look really, really nice. So I'm going to make one of those templates, and my plan is to have a double height, as I say. So I'm going to have a doorway underneath, like this. I'll have the ruin coming up like this. I might do it slightly wider. I might, or not. I'm undecided at the moment how I'm going to actually arrange this, which I'll make a decision on and show you. But basically, there will then be a window on the top floor above, and then some, and then the extra details, which is going to come in the upper floor, which I'll cover off in another section, will then be below where that window is. So it will just be a little bit more complex, and will be a little bit more interesting to look at. So I'm going to go away, make this template, and get that cut into this, and have a think about exactly how big I want it. I'm thinking this might be quite a large one, and I might actually trim this down a little bit so it's not quite the 25 centimetres it is now, maybe do it to about 18 or 20, and then have another section that's also double height, and then have that as a whole large kind of like ruin. So that's what I'm thinking at the moment. I might even leave it 25. So I'll be back when I have my template and show what it looks like when it's cut out. Well, here we have it. We have the doorway and we have the window, and I'm pretty pleased with how that looks, actually, to be honest. I'm pretty happy with that. I've done the window slightly differently to what they did. Just realised that they did it so they only had a single central column, and then there wasn't the architrave on both sides. So maybe I'll adjust that actually now, because I think that's going to look nicer. It's not quite so easy to do with the template I did, but I might just extend that out to the sides. But other than that, what I'm going to do is glue these to it down, and then I'll mark the bricks across as I did before. And what I'll also do is make a second length of the same height. This is twice height, so it's 15 or 150 mil. I'll do a second one to come out the sides, and that will be a really nice large building. Of course, what I could do, rather than doing a second one, is actually come along here and make use of this as its second one. So I might do that. But anyway, I'm muttering as I always do. That's how that looks. That's the decorative arched windows. And later on we'll come along and do the upper floor on this one as well. So very shortly I'm going to be moving on to details and putting them onto bases. So I think the next thing is going to be another alternate material. So the next material that we're going to use as an alternative is, cardboard. So this is a box which actually I have my miniatures in some display cabinets, and this is the box that it comes with, and it's just going to be perfect because these end tabs here and here are pretty much the correct height, and the cardboard that they use is double corrugated, which gives it a good bit of thickness. So what I'm going to do is come along with my sharp knife and cut these end tabs off. If you're doing this, be very careful. You can use scissors if you want to, but the thing with scissors is that it compression cuts, so it can sometimes cause things to bend, whereas cutting with a knife means that you don't get that bend. So what we're going to do is cut this out. There we are. So with a sharp knife it's very easy. So I'll cut the other side out, and then we'll come back in a second with the next step. So there we are, I've got 2 tabs and I'm sure that you've guessed how this is going to work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to measure on and draw on the same size bricks as we have on the other one. I've obviously got not a very neat line where I actually cut it away from the box. So what I'll do is I'll measure from the bottom 7.5 centimetres, so they're the same height, and then use a straight edge to cut the top so that it's definitely going to be the right height. And then I'll cut in the descending blocks across. Now what I'm thinking I might do is, in the same way as the other one, I might actually end up doing a double thickness just to give it a bit more depth on the wall. So what I'll do, I think, is work on one of them, get a shape out of that, get that cut out, and then transfer and glue it to the other one. So I'll do the drawing and then I'll come back and show you when I come to the gluing so you can see what I mean. So I'm not sure I explained that very well. So yeah, a bit of measuring up, 1.5 centimetre high blocks, 3 centimetre wide, cut out the shape, and then I'll be back. So here we have what I'm going to do. So I've taken both of those tabs and as I said, I drew the lines on one of them, and you can see if that catches in the light, you can see there on that one there, and also on this one here. And then I cut one out, and I just used a craft knife to do that, a very sharp craft knife, because you don't want to be bending or compressing the edges, as I've said. And what I'm now going to do is glue these together, and then there's going to be another step to do, which is to seal off the edges. Now I just seal off the edges of that using masking tape, and I will film that, so I'll show you how I work that. But you just seal off the edges, and then they get basically at the same stage as the other builds, and it's a really easy, as you've seen, just a couple of minutes. Stick a YouTube video on while you're cutting, and then it just gets done. Really easy, and you don't have to have any special tools, just a knife and an old cardboard box. And you can have some really nice terrain. You'll see just how good this looks when it's finished. So there we are, that's another alternative. Probably one of my favourites. I really love working with cardboard, more and more I do. So yeah, hopefully that inspires you to just pick something up and make something. You don't need special tools or special materials to make awesome terrain for your wargaming table. These are glued together nicely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along with some masking tape, like I say, and mask over the edges. And then when that's done, I can glue it together. So it is just as simple as coming along with the masking tape, like so, and just wrapping it around. And this means that the edges aren't open, which means that it looks a little bit more natural. So I will do that over all of the edges on this, all day long, down the steps and along the bottom. Every edge I will seal, and on both sides. And then when that's done, I won't film it, but what I'll do is I'll glue them together at the 90 degrees like that, and then we have our piece. So that's how you use cardboard. I think it looks really nice. I've now got one more thing that I'm going to make, which is the big piece, the big ruin. So I'm going to use a slightly different technique. I'm not going to double up on XPS. I'm going to use a thicker sheet of XPS. I'm not going to use a thin XPS. I'm going to use some other size. So I'll bring you along for that when I come to it, which is going to be next, and then we'll get on to the detailing. There is one very quick thing to add before I move on from this, which is what I'm doing is I'm putting some PVA on, and I'm sealing both sides and using it to just make sure that these bits of masking tape are actually stuck down properly. This is the one issue probably with this technique, is the fact that the masking tape is not the stickiest thing in the world. You could use some like paper-based other style of tapes potentially, which has more stick to it if you can find it. So maybe some carpet tape, but I've not yet found anything that's actually going to be right for this, because you need it to be. I mean, you could even potentially use gaffer tape, and that would give a nice texture, but it doesn't really hold paint very well. So that's the only issue with this technique. If you can get XPS, you're going to have a better result, put it that way. But yeah, so I'm just basically painting a sheen of PVA over the top to seal the to seal down both the cardboard and also the masking tape. And then when that's dried, then I'll be sticking them all together. So yeah, I just wanted to add that. So what we're going to do now, as one of the last buildings that I'm going to make, is a larger ruins. You are not limited to creating buildings that have almost completely been destroyed. You can construct buildings using the same techniques that are as complete or undamaged as you like. Your ruins can also be as large or as small as you wish. I'm going to do a large ruin here. And I'm also going to make use of some other techniques like the round beading using a dowel in the windows and what have you. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of a slightly different material as well. That's also something to show you. So this is 1 centimetre thick Blue XPS, which is really, really good for using. It's a really good material and I like it a lot. So what I'm going to do is I am going to measure up and then cut out. I have my safety ruler, as you can see, and I will use a knife for this. I won't use the Proxon. I'll cut out the shape and then I will do the markings for the bricks, and then I will cut away the bits I want to have fallen down. And I will also probably make some more return walls so that this can be kind of like just a big fascia but very little behind it. So I'll do a couple of return walls, and I'll also make use of this material. So I'm going to get that done. I'm going to do some drawing, I'm going to do some cutting, and when I've got something to show you, which will probably be around doing the beading and the decorative doorway and the kind of more advanced stuff there, I'll probably bring you back for that. So I'll get most of the stuff which is the same done, and then bring you back when I'm doing something a little bit different. Here we go, here's the other one. So all I'm going to do here is just glue some of these on in random spots, just to add a little bit of interest for when we come to do the texturing and the painting. So slap some PVA on the back and glue them on like that. Now of course you can do much smaller blocks if you want, but I'm going for the kind of idea that this is quite a monumental place, which I believe that Osgiliath was, and so I'm going for big blocks. There we are. And again, trying to make them stick on can sometimes be a challenge, but we are going to go over this with some paint, so that will add a bit of security to these once they'll be held on as much as I can with the PVA. So there we are, a little bit of decoration, very, very simple, very, very basic, but I think it will look quite nice when it's painted up. So what we'll do now is have a look at how I'm going to apply the plaster to the buildings which I've done actually with scored bricks. So you really can use any filler you want. This is the local water-based wood putty, and this is polyfiller, which is the stuff that we have in the UK. So I'm going to use the local stuff for this. And you literally just get yourself a palette knife, or if you don't have a palette knife, a tongue depressor or something like that. All I'm going to do is going to come along and I'm going to plaster with it. It literally is plastering. Now I did do a plastering course, not that you'd be able to tell, look at the terrible technique. I did a plastering course before I moved out to Bulgaria because I thought I might actually do my own plastering, but I've never done it. But plastering is a case of having a good, nice angle of attack on your applicator and just pulling up. There we are. So all we're going to do is we're just going to put that in places, not all over it, but just in places, and then when that's painted you'll have bricks and you'll have plastered areas, and we'll be able to do something quite cool with that. I think it will look quite nice. So yeah, I'll get that done on this building, and I'll also get it done on the other one because I've done a couple with this technique, and when I've done that and when it's all dried and we're ready for the next step, I'll turn the camera back on and show you the next step. Well, let's get to detailing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this as the basis because it's going to have a mix of everything, and then I'll apply all these techniques to the other builds as well. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing is creating a upper floor here, as I've said. So I'm going to make use of some of this thin XPS. It suggests to use balsa wood, which isn't a bad idea. I might use balsa wood, but I've also been saving lots and lots and lots of, this is how many ice creams Rosie's eaten over the summer. I save all of the ice cream things, so all the sticks, so I might make use of those as well. So the first thing to do is to score this up, cut it to a shape I want, and then glue the sticks on, because I think I'm going to do that while it's not stuck to the model, because then I can kind of rough the edges up, cut them to shape, and then I'll let that dry and stain it while I'm working on the rest of the build. So I'll get this scored up, start gluing, and I'll bring you along when I come to the actual gluing on of whatever material it is I choose to use, yeah, then that can be left, and we'll get onto the base and everything that goes around this, which is going to be a mix of materials. So we've got our shape here, and I am going to make use of these. I've been wanting to use them, wanting an excuse to use them for a while, but they're going to take a little bit of time, so I'll probably do this while I'm watching another video. But basically I'm going to make use of these snips to cut off the flat end at the far end, which works okay, and then offer it up. And I might glue as I go as well, actually, just so they're not shifting around too much. If I offer it up like that, then I can kind of work out roughly where I want the cut to go, and then I can also come in again with the same snips, and it's kind of a cut and a tear, which actually works quite nicely. Turn that over the other way, and that there is going to give a nice kind of like raggedy edge to the floor. So you can also see that I have scored off this so that it will glue correctly. So I'll just use PVA to glue that down. I'll snip all these off, PVA it down, and then weight it down and leave it, and then we'll come back to the main part of the build. So that's how I'm going to do my upper floor. So the first thing I'm going to do is lay down some floorboards, and I'm going to make use of coffee stirrers for this, having just used the lollipop sticks for the upper floor, but that's fine. So what I'm going to do is put some PVA down and spread it out, and then just drop a load of the coffee stirrers on. I'm not going to do it all over the floor because I'm going to do some areas where it's lifted and where there's gravel, which I'll probably do at the same time, to be honest, because this will all stick in nicely. So we're just going to spread that out, not too thick. If you keep it nice and thin, it won't cause as much of a warping issue, and it will also dry quicker. So those are two definite bonuses. So get that spread out. So there we are. Now these are rounded edges, but I don't care because I'm going to come along afterwards and I will be covering up those edges, so you won't see them because there'll be rubble and all that sort of stuff piled on. So we're just literally going to come along here and put them in place. And if we want to have a gap, all you do is you tear one in half, like this. They break nicely. So I will now make this up, and then when I've got enough, what I will be doing is I will be putting the weight on it using my metal plates that I use all the time to weight it down so they don't warp, and then leave that to dry. So I'll get that done and leave that to dry, and I'll bring it back in a bit when I get to the next step. So another slightly different technique which I'm going to show you here is to use balsa wood. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just literally stick that down, weight it down with the same board weight, same metal weight, and then when it's dried I'll come along and I'll score in planks. So what we'll do is we will cut this to the correct shape, like that. This is a very, very thin, paper thin sheet of balsa. Once again, you don't want lots and lots and lots of glue because balsa really does warp fast. So we'll put a thin skim of glue in, set that in and weight it down, and then when that's dried I will show you how it works with to draw in some planks. So yeah, that's another alternative way of doing it if you don't want to sit here and break up lots and lots and lots and lots of coffee stirrers. You might do it with a sheet and then score it in. There we are. So by mistake I put a little bit too much glue on this section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some gravel on it now and some sand, just because I'm tight and I don't like wasting anything, and I am going to come along and cover all of these. So this is what I'll do. I'll just throw piles of gravel all over this one. Some of them won't be the same as this. I'll do them a little bit more selectively, but if you want this to now actually have those piles, which I do, what you're going to do is get some alcohol, spritz over the top with alcohol, which will help break the surface tension and will mean that when I now drop some watered down glue on it, some of my terrain glue, that will now sink in really, really nicely, and we'll stick those down as they are there in the mounds. Oops, sorry about that bang. Just knocked something over. So yeah, so we're going to just get the dropper and drop the glue on, and you can see that because we've spritzed the alcohol, that now sinks in nicely, and we'll have these nice textured layers of larger lumps of sand. So I'll let that dry, and then I'll come back and do the rest of the texturing later. But I've done all of the floorboards now, so just going to need to leave those to dry, and then yeah, I'll be back in a bit with the next step. For this bigger building, I've decided I'm going to do flagstones. It's obviously a slightly higher kind of class building, or a bigger building, and so I don't think it would have a wooden floor. So what I've got is some air dry clay down here, and I've got myself my green stuff roller here, which is flags, and I'm going to do that. So I use air dry clay quite a lot, particularly for this method, because, well, it works really well, and I've got lots of it. So there's a good reason. So I always go very, very thin. This is something I just want to be really clear about. I don't use any kind of guide or any kind of to get a thicker layer of air dry clay. Now that does make it quite delicate, and can make it quite hard to lift, but as long as you always make a little more than you need, it's not the end of the world. And in this case, we are looking at a ruined building, though this is falling apart more than it normally does. I've gone very thin on this one. So the challenge of doing it so thin is lifting it, but you can see that it does come up. Okay, so we've got ourselves a nice section of cobblestones there. So what I'm now going to do is move over to the ruin, and I will put some PVA glue on the base of where I'm going to put this. So we're going to start off in this room here. You can see I've also put a little divider in, making this into a little bit more of an interesting kind of layout than just a big open space. So we'll slap some PVA down, and the reason we do that, as I say every time I use air dry clay is not sticky. You need to provide an adhesive, else it will not stick. So we'll spread that around, and I'm going to do the entirety of the inside of this building with air dry clay, so I can spread it further. So I've put way too much down for that room. So yeah, spread it around. Don't need to do it too thick, as always. And then when you've got a good amount of the PVA, which I still don't, let me just do that. Wouldn't you know, it turned out they had enough PVA to do the entire ground floor. That'll probably dry before I finish cutting this. But what we'll do is we're going to come along, and we're just going to drop this in place. And the good thing with this is that because this is supposed to be ruined, it doesn't have to be too neat. Now, if you were trying to do a proper floor, I would probably recommend that you do the air dry clay onto another, or before you actually do your walls, so that you can get into the edges. But this is supposed to be damaged, so it doesn't really matter. So you just drop it down, and there we are. And then what we'll do is we come along, and I've got some proper sculpting tools that I picked up cheap, but you can use any kind of knife or whatever. Just trim off the bits you don't want. So there's some words on this, which really annoys me actually. That is something I don't like about these rollers. They've got text on them. Why would you do that? So there we are. We have the beginnings of a cobblestone floor. So I'll roller out more of the air dry clay and fill in these gaps, do the whole of the floor, and then just let that to go off overnight, and then we can come along and finish and do some more texturing on it tomorrow. So yeah, that's how I do my air dry clay. The next step involves more air dry clay. Now, if you are able to find textured wallpaper which looks like cobblestones, then what you would do now is you would cut it out and you'd stick it out around the edge of each of your buildings. But I don't have any. I have tried to in the past, and I've never been able to find it, and honestly, I haven't been able to get out again this weekend. Rosie's been unwell, so I wasn't able to take her out as I was planning, so I haven't been able to source any. So instead, I'm going to make use of the mega cobblestone, which I have, which is really good. Now, I was grumbling a little bit about the fact that there's writing on these rollers. I really don't grasp it, but this means that I'm going to be able to roll quite a large amount of the air dry clay and then cut out what I need and stick it onto each of the sections. So you can see I've got these two here and I've got the other ones as well. And they're all going to have the same cobblestone going around them. So I'm going to get that done, not going to run the camera. It's exactly the same technique as you just saw me do for the slabs inside the main building. Just PVA to stick it down, roll it thin, do the impression and then cut it with the sharp knife or with the tool if you've got one, and then just leave it to dry. So I'm going to do that now, and yeah, I'll bring you back for the next step when I get to it. The air dry clay is nearly dried. It's been a good few hours now. It's the next day. What I'm going to work on now is starting to build up the rubble and what have you that's around it. Now I've kept all of my offcuts from where I've cut up these stones and cut out some of the shapes, and you can just literally break this like that, even along the lines that you scored. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split up all of these bits of block. I also have some 3D printer kind of rubble, and I also have other bits of offcuts that I've saved, and I have other bits and pieces lying around which I use for rubble. So I'm going to gather all that together, get everything done, and then of course I have more than just this building to do. Here's the cardboard one. So I'm going to fill in all these gaps with rubble, with sand, with gravel, with bigger gravel, and other bits and pieces like that, maybe offcuts of wood as well, and just make it a bit more interesting. Now I do need to make sure that I keep my access points, and just actually to highlight that here, we've got an easy access point here. Any 28mm SBG model will be able to go through there, obviously through here, and obviously through the doorway. So you've got a very good area of cover, and we will of course have, here is the floor. So the floor will of course sit in there, which will mean that then there's going to be shooting opportunities from up there. But there is also access. There's the door here as well. So there's 4 ways onto this. The other thing to highlight is there's a little bit of a warp on this, not very much, and because it's cardboard I can easily bend that down, or I could maybe bend it and clamp it, but it's okay. It's not unplayable. That I'm pretty pleased. Actually thought it was going to be worse. So yeah, so I'm going to get some rubble together and I'll bring you along when I've done that and when I'm starting to actually arrange it and show you how I'm going to do that. So yeah, I'll bring you along for that. Next thing though is to show you about marking up the floor for this one. So let's get that done as well. Alright, so this is balsa wood, as I've said, which is just glued in now, and I haven't done any marking on it of course. And what I'm going to do is, using this, which is a carving tool for clay and other things, I'm going to use that to do my marks. And I want it to be relatively regular. I've done all the other floors quite irregular. I want this one to still be straight and what have you. It's a different style. So we're going to come along with the ruler, mark 1 centimetre wide, and then again using the ruler we'll come along and we'll draw a line quite deep actually, as it happens. I might even end up cutting right the way through the whole of the balsa. And there we are. Now once you've done that, I'll do another one and I'll show you. Planks are normally split, aren't they? They're normally offset. There we are. So what we can potentially do is say, here's the end of one plank, there, and here's the end of the other plank, there. So that's what I'm going to do across the whole of this, is cut those into boards and then score where the ends of them are. And if you want to go even further, you can put some nail holes in, like that. There we are. Let's zoom that in so that's a little bit more obvious. Whoop. There we go. I've got a couple of nail holes for the rivet counters among us. So yeah, that's it. And then that will be treated in exactly the same way as the rest of the floor, which I'll get to later on. This is going to be another repetitive process, so I'll show you a little bit of it and then crack on in the spare time that I have. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to focus on this back corner here by the door. So the key thing here is that I don't want to go particularly too far over in front of the door, but I probably do want to put some gravel and dust there, but nothing too big. What I'm going to be using is some chunks of the polystyrene. as you can see, and we can just break those up and tear them, put them in place. And I'll show you how I'm going to glue this down in a second. I have all sorts of different bits and pieces and different sizes of trunks that I can do. Now what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to pick that up in a second, but I'm just going to show you some of the bits and pieces. Here is some like MDF that I've popped out of different bits of kit, and just over here, just out of shot, I have buckets with different grades of sand in. So there we are. So the first thing to do is to put down the lowest part of a little bit of PVA glue into this corner, which these large chunks can sit in. So just put a dollop of PVA in, and then we can push that around with a brush so that it's not quite such a dollop, and then we can set these big bits in, and that's a good start. So yeah, and you can see a little bit more of the slight warp that I'm dealing with here, which is a pain, but it is what it is. So yeah, so we're going to chuck something there and something there. These are the bigger bits, obviously. And then if you want to pile some on top, you put a little bit more kind of glue on top, and then you can do it multi-level like that. So there we are. So that's the big bits. I'm not going to do very much more than that of the big bits. Get a little bit more scatter in the front, as I say, and then what we'll do is I'll get some of the stones, and again going from big to little, put a little bit of a scatter of stones over it to kind of build it up like that, and then some slightly smaller stones. Might be better to use a spoon for this. 1 second. There we are. With the spoon I can get in a little bit closer and be a little bit more accurate where I'm pouring it. There we are. So what we now are going to do is bring along the alcohol, spritz that all down like that, and then using a dropper, using a dropper, we will drop watered down scenic glue PVA over that, and that will soak through and harden completely. And that's what I'm going to do for all of these piles of rubble and what have you. So it'll be built up with various different bits of scatter terrain and sizes of breakage, broken up stuff. Then put some gravel and sand over the top, soak with alcohol, soak with PVA, and then leave it. So I'll get this done over the next couple of days, and then we'll come back to painting. I'll get this done as quick as I can, and I'll bring you back for the next step, which will be painting when I get to it. So now comes my favourite bit, kinda. I really do like this actually. This is where it starts to all come together. So what I'm going to be doing is I've got my terrain paint, which is normal house glue with water, PVA, and a little bit of dish soap or washing up liquid, depending on where you come from. And we're going to paint that over all of the walls and then put sand onto that. This is my version of the textured paint stage that they talk about. Now, I've got this over the bath because it's a very messy process that involves a lot of sand, and yeah, and these are quite big builds. So what we'll do is we'll paint on some of the paint like so, and I am actually trying not to drop this paint into the bath because the sand is going to land into the bath. And I'll do most of this off camera because it's a very repetitive process, but we've paint on some of the terrain paint like so, and then I have a bucket which has sifted sand in it, and we scatter it over quite liberally and then tip it off, and there we are. We have texture. Now of course this is pretty much obliterating my stones, and that's very annoying but it is what it is. So yeah, so I'm going to do that on all of this, inside and out, and on every single piece. I'll just do this over a few days when I have a few seconds. It's just before work now, So I haven't got very much time now, so I'm not going to be able to do very much more than what I've just filmed. But I'll get this done. Once the sand is dried on, which doesn't take that long actually, I'll then come along with the same paint and paint over again, and at that stage I will also paint everything, the rubble and the wood and the cobblestones, because we're going to black base the whole of this build. So yeah, so I'll probably bring you back when I come to do that black basing and just show you what it looks like. But yeah, this is going to be a lot of effort or time, which is not on camera, so just bear this in mind if you're painting along. This is not a quick process, particularly if you're making multiple like I am. But it is worth it. It does end up being very good. But yeah, it just does take some time. So the next time I film, I'll try to tell you how long it's been, but it will be a little while. Okay, so this is a bit of an unexpected clip. As I was doing it, I was aware that I was filling in all the gaps and all the lines for the bricks that I've drawn in. And I've attempted to come back, but this is too dry now for me to try and score in. You can see I've made an attempt there. It's basically too dry. It's going to be a really awkward process, and it probably won't look very nice anyway. So I've got an option here to, which I'm going to do on this one, where I'm going to do the same technique, but before the sand has dried onto the paint, I'm going to come along with a toothpick and I'm going to re-scribe out all of the bricks. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I've got this one here with scribed bricks, but also I've got that large building which I spent so long about, and I don't really want to lose all that effort. And I also really like having the bricks scribed rather than just stuck on top, which I don't think looks very nice. So I'm going to give that a go, but I just want to point that out, that might not have been the most sensible thing in the world. I probably should have scored out those lines and removed any sand and paint before it dried. But it is what it is. You live and learn, and I do make mistakes, and I like to keep them in rather than hiding them. So there's that. So same technique, but scoring with a toothpick. And I'll bring you back and show you what it looks like. Hopefully it'll going to work, because then I'm going to carry on and do the rest of the ones. The other two builds I've got obviously are the white expanded polystyrene and the cardboard. They do not have scored bricks, so they're not so much of an issue. This is only with the ones that I've done with the scoring technique. Against all the odds, I think that worked. Now, one of the biggest issues is that also the wood filler that I've put on is basically completely pointless as well on this side. So I've just scored through it as if it's not there. I will paint this up black and then decide whether I'm going to actually put some filler over the top or not. You can see that I've got filler on the inside, which is going to work okay there. But yeah, so that's what it looks like. The other challenge was actually drawing the bricks in the right place, and I'm sure I've got them wrong. It was very, very hard. I tried to use the toothpick before putting the sand on, but the paint's just so watery, it just filled straight back in again. So yeah, it's a lesson learned. The way to do this, if you are going to do this, is, well, I'm not sure. Maybe don't use sand. Maybe do use a slightly less fillery type thing to cover over and give it texture, or score in your lines after it's dry. Maybe if I thought of that, then which is what I've kind of done in a little place here, and I might end up doing that, I'm not sure, but you can see just there where I have scored it once it's been dry, then I can get the measure up out and make sure they're all equal, or just like do it like that, like I've done it when it's still wet, because it marks it much easier. So there we are, there's a lesson learned. So what I'm going to do now is finish off this process of adding in the sand and the paint on all of them, and then paint the black again over the top. And that black will go over the top of everything, including the tiles and including the floors and including the cobblestones. And then when I get to that stage, that's when I'll start filming again, because that will be the next time it's interesting. You can see this is coming along nicely, and it's working really well actually. It's not quite as much of a pain as it was the first time, because I'm getting a little bit of a technique. So what I thought I'd do is show you how I'm going about doing this. The first thing to say is I'm not doing it all in one go. So this panel that you can see here, I actually did it in 3 sections, or 4 even, maybe even 5, I can't remember, but it was a lot of sections. And the reason for that was, it meant that I had an exposed part of the carving that I could follow from, and then when I did the next bit, I could follow from what I'd just cut. Now it did mean that for the first time I made a mistake, it did mean that when I started from this side and scored it in and then moved to the next one and tipped the sand off over in this direction, it refilled. So just remember to empty the sand away from what you've already carved and you'll be fine. I am struggling a bit with warping on this bit of build. I left it by the fire without thinking, and it got way too hot and warped, so I'm a bit annoyed about that. So I'm also working to resolve that. But what I'm going to do is I'll pop the camera on in a minute when I've applied the paint to the first section and just show you how we go about scoring it so you can see. But yeah, we're just going to crack on with this, and I'm going to actually do the black paint over all the other builds as well. So yeah, just to trying to get ahead on this. I'm actually running a little bit out of time. I didn't realise that I only have a few more days on this build. It's been a very crazy month. Rosie's been very ill for the last week, so it's been a bit tough, but we're getting it done, and I'm going to crack on with this now and hopefully get this finished today, this building. That's the aim anyway. Right, so we are going to paint on some black paint, and for this first one I can empty in either direction, so I will start here, but then this means that from now on I'm going to have to empty in that direction just so that I don't clog up my lines like I've said. So this works in exactly the same way as you've seen me do loads and loads of times. What you're looking at doing is applying some paint that we're going to throw some sand over. Now, one slight difference with this technique is we're not really trying to dig it in. So if you're missing the gaps between the bricks, all well and good. So don't do what I did a couple of times, forgetting and dig your brush in and try to fill them up, because that defeats the point. This will probably be done in two sections, so I'll do it halfway along and then I'll do the second half off camera. We then have my sand, and that is done. Just throw it on and then empty it off again straight away. There we are. So now we've got our first level of sand, and you can actually see in the camera quite nicely that it's got quite that you can definitely see where these score marks are. But as I draw and this is just a toothpick, as I draw the toothpick across, you can see just how well that's coming across. And it is a bit messy because I use my finger just to take the sand off. So I'm not adding the sand back into the next groove. But that's it, simple as that. And then what you do, I'll finish the rest off camera because it's going to be a bit dull. But then what you do is you look for where your lines are, which you can generally see relatively well, and then pick them out. So, like that. And make sure that you clean your toothpick so you're not putting sand back in. And yes, it is as simple as that. It takes a bit of time, but I actually think it is quicker than if I was to have done this without scoring first. So I know it took a while to score these bricks out on the blue, but it means that I've now got a guide to work with. It would be very difficult to measure and put the lines in exactly the right place if I was trying to do this with a tape measure and what have you. That would be really annoying. So yeah, so it certainly isn't as efficient as what they say in the book, because you're having to do quite a few processes, but I actually think it looks a lot nicer. So I'm going to get this done. When it's dried, another layer of black, I'll bring it back when I get to the next step. So this is dried, painted black. It's also turned into a banana. So yeah, bit of a massive issue with warping on this build, which is a huge shame. The reason it's happened is because of the air dry clay, and I should have done my usual trick of having clampable sections and then cutting it out once I'd finished. This just shows why I always do that, and I'm annoyed at myself for not doing it. You can probably hear it in my voice. But the next step we're at is we're going to paint everything with the instructions are talking about paints that you get from Games Workshop. This is just my dark grey that I pick up from the hardware store. So what we're going to do is paint that all over all of the cobblestones and over all of the walls. and that will give us a nice grey undercoat that we can then dry brush over, and well, probably dry brush the cobbles and paint on the walls and then dry brush the walls white, I think, but with a lighter grey. So this is going to be applied in this way to all of the pieces, exactly the same. So just this darker grey, and then once that's done, dried, I'll come back and show you how it looks like when I'm doing the lighter grey. Bit annoyed, like I say, probably you can hear it in my voice, annoyed that it's warping. I'm normally very, very good at avoiding warping, but you can't win them all. And I might be able to save it. Maybe if I get time in this build, I'll show you how I might go about saving this. Or maybe I might do that just as a completely separate project. Yeah, anyway, onwards. Just going to do this over all of them. It's not very exciting. So I'll turn the camera off and I'll bring you back for the next step when I get to it. The next step on this, now that darker grey is dried, is I have my lighter grey, which I normally just use for dry brushing, but on this build it specifically is for Osgiliath. So it is a very white, the White City, it was the capital before it was destroyed. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to paint over again over the grey with this much lighter colour, and then the last step will be to do a dry brush with plain white. Now, as I've said, the instructions give paint names for using Games Workshop products, but I'm using just house paint, and you don't need to buy Games Workshop products or any special products when you're making terrain. You can make use of things you find in your hardware store. So here we've got insulation foam, which is used underneath the floor here in Bulgaria, but very thin XPS, and we've got simple coffee stirrers. It's not anything that you can't just pick up and repurpose, so just bear that in mind. So anyway, this is going to be another kind of just get it done stage. So I'll finish painting this, bring you back for the next dry brush, which actually I think, surprisingly enough, and a bit of a shock for me, is actually probably going to be near enough the last part of this build officially. Now I do still have the warp issue with this board and also with my largest board, which is really frustrating. So if I can, I will add a little bit more to this video to cover off how I'm thinking of recovering it, but I am running a bit low on time for various reasons, so that may end up being a separate video, I'm not sure. But yeah, get this painted and I'll bring you back for the dry brush, and then we'll have a look and see what else we can do. Here we come to the final colour on the buildings, which is a white house paint, and I am actually going to do this quite heavy. I should have stirred that. I am going to do this actually quite heavy because I might come along and put some washes on, I'm not sure, but I want this to really pop on the tabletop. So I'm not doing it as a dry brush, I'm going to do it as a heavy overbrush, as you can see, and it's going to look fantastic. So this is going to be the same on all of them. The big build is coming on nicely. I think now that this is actually the only one that has a major warp problem. We've managed to get on top of the warp problem for the big build, so I'll see how I feel about fixing it. Obviously once I've done this, I'm going to have to do the woodwork, which I had forgotten about before, but yeah, I need to do the woodwork. Well, I'm not worrying about it for now, as you can see. I'm just letting the paint drop on and spatter and all that stuff, because, you know, end of the day, it's going to happen. And then when I come to the woodwork, I'll tidy that up. So, nice white paint over the top. And, yeah, not a dry brush, but I'm also not worrying too much if there's still some shading and some grey coming through. So I'll get that done on all of them, and then I'll bring you back for the next step shortly. So this happened last night. I'm making good progress on the large build. I ran out completely of the light grey. Now the reason for that is I bought this thinking it was only going to be for dry brushing, but obviously this is not just dry brushing, it's a very heavy overbrush. So I'm going to need to go to the shops and pick some more up today, but that's fine because yeah, I am making good progress and it's nearly finished, this one. I might even be able to get stuck into these tiles, which I want to do in a slightly different colour. I want to make them a little bit more maybe sandy, maybe purpley is my thinking, even like a rich purple. I want this to look like a really high status building. But now what I'm going to do is move this off the bench and have a look at the wood of the of the other buildings, and then they'll pretty much be done. And it looks like I will have time to do a little bit of an extra, some statues, which is really cool, but I'm not going to bother doing the saving of the warp in this video. I think that would be really valuable as a separate standalone video mainly, so it's not buried in this hour plus epic. It can be a 5-minute, here's what you do jobby, so I won't be doing that. So anyway, onwards, let's get the wood done. So the wood's going to be done with the raw umber, which I really like. I really like the effect I get for that for wood. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a relatively heavy overbrush of brown, and then come along and do another dry brush of grey, because I want it to be old wood. So I'll just get myself some paper. And what we'll do is we'll just give it the impression of the brown colour. I mean, I might be able to do this and get away with not having to do more grey. If I keep this as light as I want it, I might be able to get away with it, because basically old wood is grey, isn't it? It goes to grey, and this is very old wood. So you don't want it to be too brown, but you do want the impression of wood. Just grey would be too much. So what I might do is leave that to dry. That's already done. And see what colour that dries out to, and then make a decision of what my next step will be, whether it will be grey or not. But that's such a quick technique, as you can see, and I think that looks really nice. It's coming out quite brown. I might have overdone it slightly. I might need to come in with grey, but I'll let that dry and see what it looks like. So I'll bring you back and let you know what I do then. One thing that they suggest you make, which I am going to have time to do, which is really cool, is statues on a plinth. So they only suggest that you make one with a standing man, but I've got these from my bits box. They're slightly damaged. This one has a broken spear. This is actually a rider of Rohan, but I don't mind that. And I've got this guy here who is a Gondorian soldier. So what I'll do is I will probably stick something on the back there, maybe a length of wire or something, just to make him not have half a spear. And I will clip that off the base, and I'll paint them up just to be looking like they're white stone. So grey primer, and paint them over with off-white. And then we'll put them on top of a plinth, and I'll show you how I go about doing that. But I'm going to get these painted up first, and then I'll make the plinth and stick them together. So yeah, that'd be really nice. Bit of scatter terrain, add a bit of character to the table. Maybe make it quite an interesting terrain piece to use in some of the scenarios for Middle-earth strategy battle game. And a really easy technique, which I'll probably use a bit. I've thought about doing it a lot, and now I've actually got the impetus and the reason to. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this little bit of the build. So the miniatures are downstairs being painted and drying, and I've fixed up the spear on the one I said I was going to. And what I've done here is I've cut out some blocks just of expanded polystyrene, and then I've made use of some of the spare of the 5mm thick XPS to act as a base. And I've also found myself an old print that didn't work very well that I'm going to make use of. That failed quite dramatically, but I'm going to make use of that as another one for a more generic fantasy setting if I need it. So we're going to end up with 3 of these, and I'm going to do a few bits and pieces, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glue them down to their bases. So I've already come along with the wire brush and roughed up that base, and I'm just going to use PVA. So you put a bit of PVA on, spread it around with your finger, or with a brush probably would be better, because then you don't get it all over your fingers, but it's okay. And then that will go off in not very long. It dries quite quickly, PVA actually. It doesn't take very long at all. So we'll build each of these 3 plinths up with PVA, and then when they're dried I'll show you my trick, because I don't just want them to be square blocks. I'm going to do some banding on them and other things. I'm not going to use the air dry clay to get any kind of like more advanced reliefs on them, but I'm going to do banding and what have you, so we'll have a look at how I'm going to do that. So this shouldn't take long to dry. I should better get back to this today, and I'll go and get that onto the painting table as well, and get that primed up and painted white or whatever colour I decide to paint her for this. So yeah, pleased I've managed to get to this. I wasn't sure if I'd have time. It's been such a crazy month with Rosie being unwell. And there we are. So that didn't take long to glue. Leave them to dry. I'll bring you back in a bit when I'm about to do the next step. You can see that this has glued up nicely. So what I'm going to do now is add on a little shelf just around here, about 1 centimetre below the top of the wide part. If I haven't just broken it, I might have done. I might have to glue that again. PVA is good, but it's not very strong at times. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use PVA and pins to hold this in place. Now, just thought I'd quickly show you how I'm going to go about doing this. So the technique will be to run a bead of PVA roughly where I want it. If I can get some PVA out, there we are. A little bead of PVA. And then I've already roughed this up with my wire brush, and it just broke as I was doing it, and it broke the right length, which is lucky. That wasn't what I was aiming on doing, but it was purely lucky that it worked. So we'll do the next side, and I'll show you what my technique was supposed to be if I didn't break it. So the idea is that you offer it up round, overlapping, and then you can come along with a sharp knife and we can cut it like this. There we are. And so now I can do the other side, and I have another section here which is also, these are just offcuts, as I say, that had lying around. So that will give it a nice shelf, and what I'll do then is I'll pop a couple of pins in just to make sure it doesn't get knocked. I might need to re-glue the bottom. I might have come to this a little bit soon. I am in a bit more of a rush than I normally would like to be on this. I'm a little bit behind. But that's going to look really nice, I think. Just a decorative little bit of beading. It'll add some interest, and hasn't taken very long at all to do. So once this is glued up and dried, I will then put the same texture, so the same sand paint mix, and make it and paint it with the greys and the whites up to white. So yeah, so I'll show you what it looks like when it's finished, but that's basically what I'm going to do there. I might do some different beading on some other ones, and if I do, I'll bring you along and show how I'm going to do it. I'm thinking about some thick mounting board, but yeah, so I'll get this done, move on to the next one, and bring you along for that as well. The next idea, rather than mounting board, is to use some offcuts of balsa that I've got. For these, I am going to cut and measure and then glue on once I've cut and measured, because I'm going to need to clamp them because balsa wood does warp. So we'll come along and we will work out where to cut it so it has an overlap, and then cut that very carefully. Now, as I always say when using balsa wood, don't try and go through in one pass, because you'll cause it to splinter. Patience is the key. I was always put off using balsa wood because I was impatient. Now you can see you can get a nice cut without it splintering if you're just patient. So what I'll do is I'll cut out 4 lengths, or 3 more, that length, and then glue them in place and clamp them, and then leave that, and that'll be a nice little bit of beading on this one as well. I might use some slightly thinner balsa and do an equivalent in roughly the middle of the second layer on this as well, but we shall see. Onwards. The final one is going to have a multi-stepped affair, and I'm going to make use of this mounting board. So I've just offered up the width I need to go around the bottom, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that out, make a sandwich with maybe 2 or 3 steps, and then when that sandwich is dry, I'll then glue it onto the actual plinth. So I'll get that done, and yeah, you'll see what it looks like when they're all completed, because the other 2 are now setting up, and this one won't take me very long at all. Left these overnight. Now it's quite early because I woke early, and I'm going to attempt today to finish these in a day, which the only trouble is with drying time. So these are going to be treated in the same way as the other things on this build. So I'll be doing the black paint and sand, and then some more black paint, and then grey. However, as I talk, I might actually look at doing these just with grey paint and sand and grey paint, and then put white on top, just to cut out at least 1 or 2 stages of drying time, which is what's going to slow me down. But I'm really pleased with how they've come out. This kind of stepped affair looks quite nice. We've got quite a larger kind of lip there, and then we've got the wide lip there, and they look really well, really simple. Didn't take me very long at all. Just the drying time again that took the time. So I'm not going to film all the process of doing this. Next time you see these, they will hopefully be ready for the statues to go on top. Those statues have been painted, as I've said, so they'll go on nicely. So yeah, let's get cracking. Let's see how quickly I can get this done. If I can finish this today, that'd be really awesome. I changed my mind. I had a sudden thought, and I'm going to try this. I don't normally use this for large areas, particularly not for playing terrain, but I think it's going to work in this case. I'm going to use white grout, my grout mix. Now, there is a link below in the description of this video and every one of my videos of how I go about doing this. So I won't go into huge depth now. If you're very interested in that, just go and check out that other video. But I thought I'd show you the component parts, and then I'll get to mixing and applying it off camera. So you take 1 part or 2 parts grout to 1 part dust. Do not want to be sand, it wants to be very fine. Let me just, don't know how well that's going to come out, but it needs to be very fine sand. I will try to get a better shot of that in a bit. Maybe I can do it on here. Very fine sand, so dust, really dusty. And then 1 part PVA and then splashes of water to suit. Remember, you cannot take water out of a mix, you can only add it. And the last thing to say in this segment is that I've found that grout is a little bit hydrophobic. It doesn't want to mix. However, with the addition of the sand and the PVA, it mixes a bit easier, but it's still going to take time. So just because it's taking a while for it to combine, don't add more water, just keep mixing. So that's going to give me a really nice, still flexible because of the PVA, slightly stronger because of the sand, and it's going to be white. So I'm going to try that. So I'm going to get that painted on. It also dries much quicker. So the grey paint with sand and grey paint and then white paint, I'd be looking at the whole day. I'll be finishing tonight. This should be dried and ready for a coat of white paint and PVA mix to seal it in a couple of hours. It dries much quicker. So anyway, I'm going to get on with this. Let's see if it works. So while these are drying up, I've done 1 coat. I might end up doing 2 coats of the grout on that. I'm going to stick the subfloor in on this building, just in there. Now this might end up getting knocked off and I might end up doing this again, but for now I'm going to try just using this super strong moment. And one of the good things about this is it's white, and in this case that's good because the building's white. So I'm going to run a bead along each edge and press that in place, hold it for a minute or 2. It's got a pretty good grab, so generally when it holds quite well, which is a benefit of this over some of the other glues that I use. But yes, it is white, so if you're not building a white building, I'm trying to think of another word then you're going to need to paint it, and it doesn't take paint all that well from my experience. But as you can see, it grabs really well, so I've just had to press it in and that's going to stay. So that will dry over a day or so, that'll be dry by tomorrow. And hopefully that will hold well enough. If it doesn't, then I might end up having to pin through and what have you, but I want to try to avoid that, so this is a bit of an experiment. Fingers crossed that will put up with play. I'll be able to lean a ladder up against that and give access to that in game. But yeah, I think that looks really cool. So there we are, that's the subfloor being glued in with Moment Fix Extreme Power, apparently. Well, these plinths have worked out really well. I'm very pleased that I decided to go with the grout. You can see it's given a really nice texture. And my statues have also painted up nicely, just done a very basically grey undercoat and a off-white for the outer 2, and then bronze with a green wash over for the centre one. So what I'm going to do is remove those statues as miniatures from their bases and stick them on. Though I might leave this one on her base and go back now and paint more bronze on the base so that she's on a base on a bronze plinth. I think that will look nicer. But certainly for these 2, I'm going to take them off the bases and stick them down straight away. So I'll get that done, and then we're pretty much wrapped up, I think. And we'll get some pictures and wrap up. So yeah, it's been a really, really good build, really fun, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope that you've learned a lot watching, and I hope that you'll give it a go, because these are really simple and there were some really good different techniques. And I will follow up with a whoops, I warped my board video, and we'll save that one that's particularly bad, and I'll release that very soon after this one, hopefully. Well, that was close. I almost forgot to do this. I want to put a dry brush of like a plummy purple over these floor slabs in this high, in the high status building. So I've got my dry brush here, and I'm going to come along and dry brush over the whole of it. And the reason I'm doing this is basically just for fun. I just want it to stand out a bit more. I don't want it to be just grey and white. I'm not really a big fan of that type of thing. And I'm sure that the Osgiliathians would have had something like a purple floor. I don't want it to be, I want it to look old and damaged, so I don't want to go too nuts. I'm not looking to paint it. I just want to give the impression of something purple. There we are. So a little bit more and that's done, and then it will be time for pictures. Excellent. There we are. Perfect. That just gives a nice kind of a bit of colour to the scene and makes it a little bit more interesting to look at. Well, there we are. What a fun build that was, and it's turned out basically a table full of terrain, as you've seen. Those pictures are taken on a 6x4 table, so if you're only playing 4x4, there's definitely enough. If you're playing 6x4, you could maybe get away with some roads or some other ruined walls or some other ruins that have been made during this series, or very quickly throw together another couple like this, because it didn't really take very long. It was an easy enough build, and hopefully with the alternative materials that I've suggested, you'll be able to make something like this no matter how difficult you find it to get one or other of the materials. The pity is that I didn't use the official material for the basing, which I just can't get myself, the plastic card. Yeah, I'm sure that that would have worked just as well, and if that is available to you, it's probably a better option. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you've managed to get this far, really appreciate it. I love the fact that people watch my videos. Do leave me a comment below. I love reading them all, and I do reply to them all. I'm not just saying that. If you check, you'll see I reply to every single one. Yeah, they really do inspire me, and I love reading them. So I'll wrap up by saying, as I always do, and it means a lot to me because this month Rosie's been sick, yeah, she's getting better, thankfully. So yeah, please do stay healthy, stay safe, and stay well.